All right, let's set the scene. It's 1954, Tokyo, Haneda Airport. Think hot, sticky midsummer. You know, that heavy air.
Yeah, classic Tokyo summer. And arrivals are bustling. Everything seems normal.
Until this one guy steps up. He's about to become the center of a riddle that honestly still gives me chills.
And he didn't look like trouble, right? Reports say mid-40s, neat appearance, gray suit, looked like a typical businessman.
Carried himself well, confident, like he'd done this trip 100 times.
Exactly. But then he hands over his passport.
And boom, everything changes. The passport says he's from Taured.
Taured. P-A-U-R-E-D. The official probably thought, okay, maybe a typo, a small, obscure place I haven't heard of.
But nope, they check and double check. No Taured anywhere.
And the passport itself, it looked, well, real. Leather-bound, proper insignia for this Taured Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Fills with visa stamps, too.
Yeah, and not just any stamps. France, West Germany, the UK, places you'd expect. And, get this, multiple entry stamps for Japan over the last 5 years.
5 years. So he'd supposedly been through Haneda before with this passport.
That's what the stamps suggested. And apparently, the ink on the Tokyo entry stamp was identical across all those visits. Very consistent.
Okay, hold on. Let's piece this together. A real-looking passport, a history of travel, including to Japan, from a country that just isn't on the map. What else did he have?
Well, his wallet had normal stuff. Current, authentic European money, francs, marks, pesetas. A reasonable amount for a business trip.
Right. And business papers?
Yep. Contracts, company letters, even a corporate ID badge. All looked very professional, very mid-century standard. He claimed he was there for regular meetings, said he had Japanese clients.
Did anyone check on those clients?
Yeah.
Or the company?
They tried. Total dead end. The company didn't exist in any records. The Taured Ministry vanished into thin air, diplomatically speaking.
And he had other ID?
A Taured driver's license, even a French tax certificate listing an address in Taured, which of course led nowhere.
But visually, the documents passed. No obvious forgery.
Apparently not. That's the really weird part. They looked good.
So faced with all this, how did the man react? Was he like, oops, wrong dimension?
Not quite. He seemed genuinely confused that they were confused. He kept insisting Taured was real. A kingdom over 1,000 years old, he said.
Where did he say it was?
He pointed right at the map between France and Spain, where Andorra is. He got quite agitated when they showed him Andorra, saying, no, that's Taured. It's always been Taured.
Wow, okay. And his general attitude? Did he seem like a spy or maybe someone unwell?
Reports say he was calm, polite, cooperative, actually, even as things got stranger. Fluent in French, Japanese, Spanish, but with an accent nobody could quite place.
Yeah.
Vaguely European.
And he stuck to his story.
Completely. Described his country, its capital, recent politics, none of it matching Andorra or anywhere else.
This is just baffling. So what did the officials do? You can't just let him wander off.
No, exactly. They detained him, put him in a hotel room near the airport overnight, secure room, guards outside the door. Standard procedure for a complex case, I guess.
Makes sense. And the next morning?
He was gone.
Gone. Like escaped.
Not exactly. The door was locked from the inside. The guards heard nothing all night. No broken windows, no fire escape shenanigans, nothing.
And his stuff? The briefcase, the impossible passport?
Gone too. Everything. Vanished without a trace. Like he just, well, evaporated.
Okay, that's officially crossed into the Twilight Zone. What about the investigation afterwards? Fingerprints? Records?
They looked, of course. Found nothing new. No prints that weren't already accounted for from when they processed him. No match for his description anywhere. No record of him leaving Japan. And as we know, no Taured, no company.
So the authorities just hushed it up.
Seems like it. Probably to avoid a huge international incident or just mass confusion. It became an internal matter, no public report, ever.
A man arrives from nowhere with proof of his impossible origin, then vanishes from a locked room. You mentioned spy novels earlier, and it makes you think about Japan in '54.
Absolutely. Post-war Japan was rebuilding. The U.S. military still had a significant presence, and the Cold War was really heating up. Big time.
So places like Haneda Airport would have been under intense scrutiny.
Right.
Lots of suspicion, checking documents carefully.
Exactly. Immigration was on high alert for spies, for anything irregular. Espionage was a real constant threat.
Which makes the Taured man even stranger. If his documents were forgeries, they must have been incredibly good to pass that initial check in that climate.
That's what fuels the spy theory. Maybe he was an operative. Creating fake identities, even fake countries, was a known tactic. KGB, CIA, MI6.
Yeah.
They all did it. Deep cover legends.
But why Taured And why Japan in 54? What would be the mission? It seems like a very risky, very strange way to operate.
Unanswered questions, definitely. And who was the target? It all seems off for a standard spy op, which leads to other, maybe even darker possibilities.
Like psychological operations. PSYOPs.
Right. Testing the waters, seeing how Japanese authorities would react to something utterly impossible. Some declassified documents from the era hint at agencies experimenting with things like this, using operatives with geographically unassigned backgrounds. Think MK Ultra vibes, maybe? That's a disturbing thought, using someone like that. But didn't you say his behavior didn't quite fit the spy mold?
That's the counterargument. He was apparently so genuinely confused, calm, compliant. No escape attempts until he wasn't there anymore. Wouldn't a trained agent have an exit strategy or try to blend in once caught? His reaction seems more authentic bewilderment.
And 1954 was such a tense time globally, especially in Asia.
Hugely tense. The Korean War armistice was recent. Japan was starting to rearm. Haneda itself was expanding, becoming this major transit point and, an intelligence crossroads.
So in that environment, maybe the authorities, Japanese or even American, knew more. Maybe they did intervene after he vanished from the hotel. Classified it top secret. It's a definite possibility. Maybe they decided the whole thing was too sensitive, too potentially disruptive for national security, and just made it disappear from the records.
The silence itself is just deafening, isn't it? No official report, nothing in the papers at the time.
It's one of the most compelling parts of the mystery, that complete official vacuum. The story only started trickling out decades later.
When did it first appear?
The earliest trace seems to be a Japanese book from 1981. It mentions, sort of briefly, an unnamed European guy with a Taured passport at Haneda back in the 50s. Just a small anecdote in a collection of weird post-war stories.
So it took nearly 30 years to even surface in print.
Seems so. Then, by the late 80s, it started appearing in Western books about paranormal stuff, weird disappearances, time slips, that sort of thing.
And the story stayed pretty consistent.
Remarkably so, which is unusual for these kinds of legends. The core elements, Haneda, 1954 Taured passport, the map, the hotel, the vanishing, they remain largely the same across different tellings.
That consistency does make you wonder if there's something real at its core, however strange.
It feeds the speculation, for sure, and it circles back to that idea of suppression. Haneda was strategic. Maybe U.S. or Japanese intelligence encountered something they couldn't explain, a security threat, a psychological anomaly, who knows, and just buried it deep.
Are there other cases like this? These mystery men from the Cold War?
Oh yeah, it's kind of a mini-genre. The Green Man in Norway, the Somerton Man in Australia, the Taured Man in Poland. They often share traits. Mysterious origins, weird clues or documents, official dead ends, survival through rumor.
But the Taured guy seems unique in how completely unresolved it is.
In many ways, yes. Some of those other cases have had developments, new theories, even potential identifications emerge over time. Taured. Still a total blank slate, officially.
What about simpler explanations? Mistake. Mental health issue.
People definitely proposed those. Maybe it was a simple passport misprint. Maybe the man was delusional. But those don't easily explain the vanishing, the locked room, the guards, the missing briefcase. That's the part that defies easy, conventional answers.
And the lack of mainstream coverage just let the legend grow.
Exactly. It became this underground story, passed around, amplified over time, especially once the internet got hold of it.
Let's focus on Taured itself. The country between France and Spain, where Andorra is. He didn't just say the name, he described it.
Apparently in some detail. An old kingdom, over 1,000 years old. Neutral, traded internationally. The Pyrenees are historically complex borderlands. Andorra's status is unique. It's not completely impossible to imagine a scenario where history went differently in that little pocket of Europe.
An alternate timeline, essentially.
That's where the more out there theories start. If you entertain the idea of parallel worlds, maybe branching off with every quantum choice.
The many worlds interpretation.
Right. Could there be a universe where Andorra didn't form, but Taured did? And did this man somehow slip between that reality and ours?
Okay, now we're really diving deep. Dimensional travel.
It sounds like sci-fi, and look, there's no hard proof. But theoretical physics does play with concepts like microtears and space-time. Information leaks between realities. It's on the fringes, but it's not entirely out of bounds conceptually.
And this connects to things like the Mandela effect, people remembering things differently.
It gets brought up a lot in those discussions. The man from Taured is often cited as maybe the ultimate example. You even find people online claiming they have vague memories of learning about Taured in school, which is fascinating in itself.
Even the name, Taured. Does it have any roots?
Well, you find similar sounds, Taured, Taured in some ancient texts, some place names like the Tauride Peninsula. It's thin, maybe coincidental, but it adds another layer. Could it be a real name lost to history or suppressed?
It really makes you question maps, history.
Yeah.
How fixed is reality? Can someone bring their reality with them?
That's the core of the paradox, isn't it? The story, real or not, forces us to confront how fragile our accepted facts might be.
So let's lean into that interdimensional idea for a moment. It does tick a lot of boxes, doesn't it? Explains the documents, his certainty, the non-existence of Taured here, even the vanishing.
It's a neat, if speculative, package. If you accept the premise of parallel universes existing, which the many worlds interpretation suggests, then a physical shift isn't logically impossible, even if we have no idea how it would work.
And the idea of geographical hotspots, places where the veil between worlds is thinner, Haneda Airport, maybe?
Some theorists suggest things like unusual energy fields, gravitational anomalies, maybe large transport hubs, places with lots of movement and energy could be more prone to glitches. There are certainly plenty of anecdotal UFO or strange phenomena reports clustered around airports in certain areas globally, including in Japan.
We mentioned Lorena Garcia, John Teeter, people insisting their reality is different.
Yes, those cases often get compared. Lorena Garcia waking up in a world subtly different from the one she remembered. John Teeter claiming to be a time traveler. The common thread is this unwavering conviction from the individual that their reality is the correct one and ours is somehow wrong.
And physics itself hints at more dimensions, right? String theory, brain theory.
Absolutely. String theory needs extra dimensions for the math to work. Brain theory imagines universes existing on parallel membranes that might theoretically interact or collide. Even quantum tunneling particles passing through barriers they shouldn't gets extrapolated wildly, perhaps, to macroscopic objects.
So while delusion is always a possibility.
The vanishing act remains the sticking point. How does a deluded person simply cease to exist in a locked room? The interdimensional theory, however far-fetched, offers an explanation for all the reported facts.
Okay, let's switch gears back to Earth, maybe. What about government intervention? A cover-up.
That feels, in some ways, more plausible given the context. 1954 Tokyo, Cold War paranoia, major intelligence presence, U.S. and Japanese. A guy turns up from a non-existent country, that screams security alert.
They wouldn't know what he was. Spy, psyop, something else.
Exactly. And in that era, the default response to profound anomalies, especially ones with potential security implications, was often containment and classification. Think Project Artichoke, other covert programs. Agencies were figuring out how to deal with unusual people.
And the CIA and Japan's Public Security Bureau worked together closely then.
Very closely. It's entirely feasible he was flagged, quietly moved from the hotel to a secure facility. Interrogated. Studied, perhaps.
And his story about Taured, they wouldn't believe it, surely.
Probably not. They might see it as part of his cover, or maybe evidence of psychological manipulation, or even a new kind of propaganda threat. Either way, the safest course, from their perspective, might be to make the whole incident disappear. Bury the file, silence anyone involved.
You mentioned other weird travelers vanishing after being detained.
Yeah, there are whispers and obscure reports. The man claiming to be from future Earth in Mexico City, the Laxaria passport in London, even older tales like the Green Children of Woolpit have elements of strange origins followed by official handling and disappearance.
What's the motive for total silence? Why not just say, we detained a confused individual?
Avoiding panic, maybe? Maintaining public confidence in borders and identity systems? Or maybe they learned something they really didn't want getting out. If his story somehow hinted at something real but destabilizing, silence is the best option. Extraordinary rendition isn't out of the question for that era.
So the Cold War machinery provided the perfect conditions, the motive, the means, the secrecy, to make someone like the man from Taured simply vanish from the official world.
It's a chilling but logical possibility based on the historical context. It explains a lack of records quite neatly.
And as we said, this isn't entirely unique. The Pollock twins, Lorena Garcia, the Gadsden man. These stories keep bubbling up.
They do. The Pollock twins raise questions about identity, maybe memory bleeding across lives or timelines. Lorena Garcia's personal account of waking up in a slightly wrong reality is deeply unsettling. The Gadsden man, completely untraceable in our digital age. It shows people can still fall through the cracks or maybe exist outside the system.
And the passport anomalies keep cropping up. Stanistan, Zalient, Maybe even more Taured sightings, though those sound more like echoes of the original story.
Right. Are they all separate incidents? Or variations on a theme? Or just the original Taured legend refracting over time? It's hard to say. But collectively, they do seem to poke at the edges of our nice, solid reality, suggesting it might be more porous than we think.
Okay, but let's bring in the skeptic's voice loud and clear. Where is the proof? Any proof at all?
And that's the elephant in the room. There is none. Zero verifiable evidence. No airport logs, no photos, no official documents, no credible witnesses from 1954 have ever come forward. Nothing contemporary.
And the story only surfaces in print in 1981. That's a long gap.
A very long gap, which strongly suggests it might not be a factual account of a 1954 event. Skeptics argue it could be a mistranslation, maybe a piece of fiction that got mistaken for fact, or perhaps a real but mundane incident from the 60s or 70s that got heavily embellished and backdated.
It does have the hallmarks of an urban legend, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Anonymous sources, unverifiable details, a setting that's specific enough to be plausible but vague enough to avoid scrutiny, and that underlying theme questioning reality or authority. It fits the pattern perfectly.
Maybe the story's power isn't in its truth, but in how it makes us feel.
I think that's a huge part of it. It taps into that modern distrust of official stories, that feeling that maybe things aren't always what they seem. It's almost believable, and that's what makes it stick.
Could the original story have been metaphorical? A thought experiment that just lost its context?
That's possible too. Maybe it was never meant to be taken literally, but as it got passed around, especially online, it shed its original framing and became presented as a real mystery. The internet has definitely amplified it.
So, while we can't prove it happened, the lack of proof doesn't stop it from being a fascinating cultural phenomenon.
Exactly. Its power might lie precisely in the mystery, in the questions it raises, rather than in any factual basis.
Let's talk about that internet amplification. How did Taured go viral?
Oh, it was tailor-made for the internet age. Early web forums, paranormal sites in the early 2000s picked it up. Then came YouTube, Reddit.
Places like Our Glitch in the Matrix?
Definitely. That subreddit, Unsolved Mysteries, people started sharing it, discussing it, even posting their own experiences that felt similar, these near-Taured moments of reality seeming slightly off. It became a kind of shorthand for that feeling.
A template for weird but believable stories.
Very much. And then it bled into fiction, creepypasta, short stories, indie films, video game Easter eggs. Taured became this symbol of dislocation, of maybe slipping sideways in reality.
It represents the limits of our knowledge, maybe? The fallibility of the systems we trust, like passports and borders?
I think so. You have believers, sure, but also skeptics who are still fascinated, and then just the general public who find it a great spooky story. It resonates because it touches on deep fears. What if I experience something impossible and no one believes me? And also deep hopes, what if there is more to reality than this?
It's amazing how it persists. And it makes you wonder, is science catching up at all? Is the idea of other dimensions becoming less fringe?
Well, catching up might be strong, but theoretical physics is certainly exploring these areas more seriously than ever before. You look at CERN, searching for signs of extra dimensions predicted by string theory.
String theory needs more than our three spatial dimensions, right?
Needs them for the math to work, yeah. Usually 10 or 11 total dimensions. And M theory, which bundles various string theories, talks about these branes, potentially entire universes existing parallel to ours, may be capable of interacting in some way.
What about timeline shifts? Or the simulation hypothesis?
Those fit in too. Multiverse models allow for branching timelines. The simulation hypothesis suggests our reality is coded, and glitches, like Taured, could be errors in the code or features of the simulation. Scientists like Lisa Randall, Sean Carroll, David Deutsch, serious physicists, are publishing work exploring these possibilities, even if they remain highly theoretical.
It reminds you that things once considered absurd in science later became accepted fact.
Exactly. Think about quantum mechanics itself a century ago, or relativity. They seemed impossible. So while interdimensional travel is firmly sci-fi now, the Taured story kind of prods us, reminding us that our understanding of reality might still be radically incomplete.
So after all this, we circle back. Who was the man from Taured? What are the most likely takeaways?
Well, you've basically got three paths, right? Path one. He was an interdimensional traveler, a genuine visitor from a parallel reality where Taured exists. If true, that changes everything we think we know about the cosmos.
Path two.
He was an intelligence operative, a Cold War ghost using an incredibly sophisticated, fabricated identity that went wrong, leading to his extraction or elimination and a total cover-up. A chilling reminder of state power and secrecy.
And path three.
It's a story A hoax, a fiction, an urban legend born from misinterpretation or imagination, amplified over decades because it speaks to something deep in us, powerful as a narrative, but not fact.
Whichever path feels right to you, the story itself clearly has immense staying power.
Undeniably, real or not, the man from Taured forces us to question. It taps into our fear of the unknown, our hope for something more, and our unease about the solidity of the world around us.
So a final thought then, for you listening. If he was real, this man from a place that isn't on our maps, what does that momentary overlap say about the ground beneath our own feet? Is our reality as stable as we assume?
Or if it's just a story, why this story? What does its enduring grip tell us about ourselves, about our collective need to believe in, or at least wonder about, cracks in the ordinary world? Something to ponder, definitely.